I'm Larry Weeks, and this is Bounce.
If somebody who has served 20 years in prison can still find the courage and be inspired enough to restart their own lives despite their rap sheet and despite all types of other obstacles, so can you. What would it be like if you were only known for the worst decision that you've made for the rest of your life? In our country, 30% of 23-year-olds already have a criminal history. And 23 is such a ripe young age. I just think it's a little young to write people off for the rest of their lives. And I know that even though I screwed up, that I have a set of gifts that is important. And so very nervously, and with the support of a few people, I started Defy Ventures almost 8 years ago as my own second chance to give second chances. I will say that in the past 6 months of my life have been the very hardest of my life, and there are so many moments when I am very tempted to stop trying. And what gets me over that kind of thinking is not being selfish and thinking about the people that I serve.
Welcome to the podcast. This is Larry Weeks. I'm excited for you to hear this episode because I think it will challenge you as it did me. This was an emotional interview for me on many levels. On one level, I was personally challenged by my guest's vulnerability. As you will hear, she is incredibly brave, and I was humbled by her resilience in doing things despite very difficult circumstances because of her commitment to her mission. So many times I've been waylaid by something or some event, and there goes the day. My guest is Catherine Hoke. She is a former venture capitalist who is using training in entrepreneurship to solve a very serious social problem, high recidivism rates in the U.S. prison system. And Cat, to that end, founded two successful nonprofits, the Prison Entrepreneurship Program and Defy Ventures. In 14 years, over 5,000 incarcerated people have graduated from these two programs, earning Baylor University MBA certificates. The programs have resulted in industry-leading low recidivism rates of less than 7%. Fast Company named Kat one of the 100 most creative people in business. Forbes named her 40 women to watch over 40. She was named one of the first recipients out of 17 of the Make Tech Human Agents of Change Award to global influencers who are shaping how technology is expanding human possibility. And she has a new best-selling book. It's published by Seth Godin, by the way, and it's called A Second Chance for You, for Me, and the Rest of Us. It's a powerful reflection on the struggles and triumphs of her journey and on her graduates' journeys, telling the stories of America's most unforgivable people redeeming their lives. We all make stupid decisions and mistakes on a continuing that range from the benign bad to life-changing horrible. Kat will challenge you to step to the line, forgive yourself and others, and move forward in making a difference. And I challenge you to listen to what she has to say. So without further ado, here's Kat. Catherine, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So do your friends call you Kat?
My friends mostly call me, all my friends call me Kat, and then business people call me Kat or Catherine.
Do you have a preference?
I think we're going to be friends. So
all right, okay, good. So first of all, the book is fantastic. It's very encouraging. I was rereading some of it last night. It seems to be, you tell me, it seems to be the story of how you started Defy, but really about Defy and the second chances that program and the programs like that are giving the incarcerated, right? And so you're taking those principles and kind of putting them in the book. Is that right?
Well, I would broaden it a little bit. It's called A Second Chance for You, for Me, and for the Rest of Us. And I do share my own story of a second chance and the many second chances and third chances and 22nd chances of the people that I've served over the past 14 years who have served time and have recovered. But the greater story or theme of the book is also, it's about your second chance as a reader. And if somebody who has served 20 years in prison can still find the courage and be inspired enough to restart their own lives despite their rap sheet and despite all types of other obstacles, so can you. And so it's a book about recovering from crisis and reinventing oneself and finding what I call your generous hustle, how you can make a positive contribution, use your skills, your resource, your network to find fulfillment for yourself, but more importantly, to make a positive difference in the world, because we all need every one of us to be making that positive contribution.
So you were at a VC firm, venture capital firm in your 20s, right? And
Right.
you decided to start, was it PEP in Texas, which is kind of the forerunner, again, correct me if I'm wrong, the forerunner to Defy, which is providing entrepreneurship and training to the incarcerated men. Why a prison nonprofit? What sparked that?
Yeah. So I went to UC Berkeley for college and studied business. And then fresh out, I started working for an investment firm, a venture capital firm. And I could see really quickly that I was going to be good at sourcing, originating deals. And the people that I worked for made a ton of money. And I could see that I was on a trajectory to do the same. And as I started to experience success very early in my life, I also was asking the same question, the questions of purpose, like why make a big fat pile of money? For what purpose? Is dying with the biggest pile of money the person who is that the way that you win this game of life? And I've always been a big picture visionary. And so I wanted to know. And I saw that a lot of the CEOs that I worked with and a lot of wealthy investors were not necessarily fulfilled. They were not necessarily living joyful lives. And I share a story in the book of something that really struck me. I was leaving the firm one night after work, walking down the sidewalk, and I saw a guy screaming, like ranting and raving outside on the sidewalk, because he noticed that his fancy new Porsche had been keyed. And I couldn't believe the fit that this guy was throwing publicly. And it struck me because I went home and I just couldn't stop thinking about whether, does this guy own this piece of metal, or does this piece of metal own him? Because I have always driven hoopties. And when my car gets keyed, nobody likes it when their car gets keyed. But for me, it's not a big deal.
What's a hoopty?
A nice old piece of metal that probably already has a lot of key marks on it and dings or whatever. Yeah. So for those of us normal people, some of us own hoopties, and so
we call it beaters. I call it a beater.
Okay, so. A beater. There we go. Okay, so a beater, a hoopty, whatever it is, and what I've realized over time is that a lot of times the more that you own, the more that your stuff will own you. And I didn't want that. And I saw the way that people who have so much money invested in the stock market, one day of a bad market can cut their wealth in half. And I've seen the way that very wealthy people can lose their sense of identity or their sense of stability and go crazy over one day in the stock market. And I didn't want to be controlled by all that. So I started asking the question of what is my meaning and purpose on earth? And how do I find that anyway? How do I find my calling? Is it just to do deals? I started to become very philanthropic. So I started to explore other ways to make a difference. And I didn't think that I'd have to jump ship from my investment lifestyle. I thought maybe I could do something on the side, which I could have. But and I started doing things on the side. When I was 26, I was invited to prison for the first time. And I was living in Manhattan, working for a private equity firm at the time. And when I was invited, my first thought was, no thanks. Of all ways for me to make a difference on this planet, prison was certainly not one of them. My only experience of anything prison related was that when I was 12 years old, a good friend of mine was brutally murdered. And I thought that anyone in prison was like the scum of the earth, wild caged animals. They could rot and die there. I was about as tough on crime, lock them up and throw away the key as one could get. And the person who invited me, she worked at JP Morgan, and she convinced me. And she asked me, haven't there been plenty of times in my life when I've had second chances? And I, even at a young age, was blessed to have amazing mentors and surrounded by people who were teaching me the ropes. And So the way that she talked about it, I could feel my heart buzzing. And I was exploring. And I also realized, and I think back now, like, what if I had said no to that invitation? Because there's so many times when we say that we're not satisfied with what we have and we want a way out, but then we're so quick to say no and dismiss opportunities as well. I started saying yes. So I said yes, and I found myself in prison in Texas, where I never thought I'd go when I was 26, and that changed my life for good.
That's awesome. I also think that, there's a corridor principle where if you don't know what to do, you just go, you try things, you try different things or expose yourself to different things. So that's an example where you were kind of looking for a purpose and you weren't sure, but you said yes, and you tried something, and it sparked something which led to something wonderful. So you started the PEP program in Texas, and then in 2010 you started Defy. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
You also said, because I just read this, I was looking at this at the book. You had successfully done this in Texas. You wrote a business plan and showed it to a Fortune 500 CEO who you really respected. He laughed you out of the office?
Yes.
Oh my
Yes.
gosh.
Yeah. So I'd been doing the work for 5 years in Texas, but New Yorkers, and I love New York because I lived in New York for 8 years. And New Yorkers are, think that they're the best. And in many ways, New Yorkers are the best, even though I'm not a New Yorker anymore. So, yeah, people told me just because you did this in Texas doesn't mean that you're going to have success anywhere else. And I was told I did not have a business model. I did not have a solid plan. And you know what? He was right in a lot of ways. And his feedback, I walked out of his office and I was like bawling my eyes out down the street because I was putting myself out there again. I felt vulnerable, like as a new entrepreneur or social entrepreneur, since I was starting a nonprofit. It's so easy for us to feel rejected very quickly. Like, we're starting something new, we're already vulnerable. And then if an investor tells us that our idea is stupid, then it can make us feel even more stupid.
It's not just, you need to work on this plan. It's stupid.
Yeah, especially when you're right at like the very beginning, it would be so easy for that idea to get shut down. But I always pursue real opinions, and I'm not just looking for yes men or yes women to tell me what I want to hear, because I'm more interested in the best idea coming about. So I'm willing to entertain feedback that tells me that my ideas are not where they should be. And a lot of people would just say, don't take that personally. And I've always taken it personally. I cry really easily. So I took the feedback personally, but then sort of depersonalized it. I was still able to move on and still start what became Defy Ventures, even though I had a lot of people tell me that my ideas would not work.
Even with the track record of Texas, and I guess maybe that's what they were also using against you, in the sense that that's only Texas, or it's localized.
Yeah, but I've faced that like all 14 years of doing this work. I mean, it's not just when getting something off the ground, it's all along the way. You have donors, you have prison systems in my case who are still saying like, this isn't a good idea or this isn't going to work. And I just have gotten used to. I used to sell Cutco knives as a teenager, and I, over time, have built more and more resilience and realized that even though I'm going to get shot down many, many times, I can still do it. And I'm going to incorporate the negative feedback that I get, the constructive feedback, to make my ideas stronger.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it's just an interesting lesson in not giving. First of all, that you're right. You need feedback, but you got to be prepared for the feedback. So I want to talk about, the PEP and Defy as far as what you were doing, which is you're training those that are incarcerated in entrepreneurship, right? And just to provide some context, because it was very powerful in the book, where all through the book, you sprinkle in the lives of some of the people that you're teaching, that you're trying to help. One said that he was a product of a conjugal visit. Mom met dad in prison, married him, got pregnant. All the while he was in prison. Within a year of his release, Dad went back to a life of drugs and crime. And one night in a jealous, drug-fueled rage, he beat up Mom almost to death. She left the next day, try to raise me by herself. She did her best, working 2 jobs as a waitress, and this left me to be raised by the streets. And then there's a guy named Johnny. He was 8. Boy, this really got me. He saw his dad get murdered by his grandfather. And then you state, if my dad had been murdered in front of me, I'm pretty sure I would have made choices that would have landed me in prison. Me too. And then you say 2/3 of your employees in training, they step to the line. You have this exercise, we'll talk about that, for losing an immediate family member before the age of 18. So 1/3 for having a family member murdered, 90% for violence taking place against them as children, and nearly 100% for having violence in their homes.
Yeah, and that's not for the employees that I had, but for the entrepreneurs in training is what I called the people with criminal histories. Yes, so the people that I've had the honor of serving for all these years have endured major childhood traumas and were victimized as children. Then they went on, they hurt people. And so many of them went on to become perpetrators, to hurt other people, because that's what was modeled for them. I don't make excuses for the bad choices that they made as adults, but many of them started these patterns as children, and they were jumped into gangs, or they started participating in gang activity at a young age, selling, using drugs. And then most of the people that I work with were incarcerated by the age of 20. And I just think that when you look at any teenager, not just teenagers raised in poverty or raised in an abusive household, and almost every teenager makes some sort of a terrible decision. And what would it be like if you were only known for the worst decision that you've made for the rest of your life? And in our country, 30% of 23-year-olds already have a criminal history. And 23 is such a ripe young age. I just think it's a little young to write people off for the rest of their lives.
What is prison like? And by the way, I'm sure it's generalizing, and so I don't know how to ask the question, but let me stumble through it. Is it a solidifying, hardening? So do they go in with whatever they have, emotionally, whatever, and then does that harden through the years of prison, or does it just depend on the individual? And in other words, so you take all that background, plus they commit a crime, then they go into prison. What does that do to their overall experience? And maybe you can't answer this question. I'm just curious.
I can. Yeah, I can. I'll speak on behalf of the people that I serve, since I know so many of their stories, and I'll speak as a generalization here. There's a movie that came out a year ago called Shot Caller, SHOTCALLER, like someone who calls the shots, that does a great job of showing how incarceration can criminalize somebody. It's a story of a young man who was not engaged in a criminal lifestyle and went to prison, and then is essentially forced into criminal activity. And in some prisons, it's like, if you don't do this to somebody, I'm going to do this to you.
I always thought that was like maybe just a movie, because you've seen that, right? Or
it depends on the kind of prison that you're sent to. I serve in a lot of the high security facilities in our country, and especially in higher security facilities, there is this negative peer pressure. They are run by gangs. But for a lot of the people that I serve who do come from a criminal lifestyle from early in age, prison can be glorified. So you almost look forward to going there. That's like your street cred, is to go and do the time. And more than 90% of people in this country who do time are men. And so young boys look up to the men from their neighborhoods, and pretty much all the men that they know who have money have also done time, because they're top drug dealers or gang members. And so you learn to glorify that behavior. And then you get to prison and you realize that it's not all that it's made out to be. but you want to fit in. And especially if you enter the system when you're younger and you're smaller, you're less muscular, you're going to go out of your way to prove yourself so that you don't get taken advantage of. And so whether you really want to participate in that or not, it's just what everybody's doing. What I say is that, like, I was trained to get my SATs to get into college and then to graduate college to get a job. We are all in some sort of an apprentice system where we're learning from our role models. And the people that I have the privilege of working with they learn from their role models as well. But then once they get into prison, they realize that it's not all that it's made out to be. And so many of them want nothing more than a second chance. And we say that we're the land of second chances. And we often don't act that way. And the prison sector is highly underserved compared to other sectors in philanthropy. And people don't want to go work with people who have made mistakes, even though that describes all of us. And so often the people I work with end up being warehoused. In America, we are the leaders in mass incarceration. We give away harsher sentences than almost any other country. We're the only country in the world that routinely sentences children to die in prison. We give out life sentences to kids. And it's crazy to me because, yeah, they made really bad choices as children, but they have the ability to change their thinking. And so many of them want to change their thinking, but then they don't have the mentorship or the programs that provide them with the opportunity to do so. And I'm working hard to change that.
When someone like you or a program like yours or a program like Defy shows up in a prison, is there this hunger that these prisoners kind of latch on to because they don't have that? Or is there cynicism that, oh yeah, here's another thing. You want to feel better, so you're coming here trying to, whatever.
I think it's easy for people who haven't had exposure to the criminal justice system to think, oh, once a criminal, always a criminal. What I experience consistently in every prison that I walk into is, yes, the incarcerated people have a level of skepticism, and rightly so. They have been screwed over by many people in their lives, especially when your own parents were not there to care for you. Why would you trust some random stranger? And so when I go in there, I tell them, I welcome them to poke holes and to be skeptical and not to trust everything, not to just take it at face value. But with that said, there is an incredible eagerness to grow, to learn, to transform. Once we enroll our first cohort, we have wait lists. Usually, like Defy has wait lists of hundreds of people at every prison yard because people want an opportunity. When they see that there's a real opportunity at transformation, people want it. They are sick and tired of being counted 6 times a day, of not being with their families. And the people that I work with, even in the highest security prisons, are so eager to make a positive difference, to discover their own generous hustle. They want nothing more than to make a positive contribution to society. And I see that every single day. And that's what keeps me fired up about working with them. Because if you, Larry, come to prison with me, or any of your listeners come to prison, and this is a serious invitation here, your words will not be wasted. Your time will be one of the best investments that you've made in your own life. Every minute of your time will matter, not just for the people who are incarcerated, but you're going to learn something about yourself as well. So you'll see that this is one of the most eager populations that you'll ever encounter. And I believe they represent America's most overlooked talent pool. And a lot of the founding idea that I've had in starting 2 organizations, so one in Texas and Defy Ventures, is that so many incarcerated people are these natural born hustlers. And there's that saying, you can't take the hustle out of the hustler. So what if you transformed their hustle? And many not everybody, but many people who sold drugs or have been involved in gangs share a whole lot in common with successful CEOs and business leaders.
Selling is a skill. Yeah.
It is a skill, and they not only know how to sell, they know how to manage. They know how to manage profits. Many gangs are run by boards of directors, and they have bylaws and constitutions, and they have bookkeepers and accountants, and they have better margins than most of the businesses that you've seen in your day. And they have not been doing this as a generous hustle, because most of them will readily admit that the businesses that they've been running have not been contributing positively to society. They're mostly centered around drugs. And that's what was modeled for them. And that's not an excuse. But now, given the opportunity, they're very eager to transform their hustling skills and use them for legal ventures.
So I want to talk about what you teach in Defy, or what's being taught there. Primarily, it's entrepreneurship, how to build a business. But it seems, when I was reading the book, personal development, all that type of information. So tell us a little about what's taught. But I want to say that you say in the book that all Defy sessions are started by people shouting affirmations.
Right.
Is that true? What are some of the affirmations, and why do you do that?
Sure. So the program that I created at Defy is called CEO of Your New Life. And entrepreneurship is the hook that we use to recruit incarcerated people and business people and volunteers like yourself. But entrepreneurship is only about 20% of the program inside prison. So there are 100 courses inside prison that are offered through CEO of Your New Life. At the end of it, the participants earn a Baylor University MBA program certificate, which is a really big deal for them, especially because they average an 8th grade education formally, but are incredibly street smart. And when they apply themselves, they show that their ability to learn and retain information. So entrepreneurship is what is interesting to many incarcerated people. But I realized along the way that we all need so much more than just entrepreneurial training. The affirmations are because we need to believe in ourselves. And I don't know if you can imagine being locked up for 20 years, being dehumanized every day, being called all types of things, and being a number in a system rather than being recognized as a human being. You look at the floor, you forget how to shake a hand, you feel written off. You feel like society does not want you. And so rebuilding their confidence and providing hope again is a big part of what we've done. And so some of the things that they say, it sounds almost like cheesy, but it doesn't matter. They say, I'm the CEO of my new life. I am proud of myself. I can hold my head high. I am forgiven. I choose to forgive me. Forgiveness is like one of the most central things and messages that I've taught. And I believe that if we don't forgive, we shackle ourselves to our past, and we all want better futures for ourselves. So forgiveness is a central theme. So they share these affirmations, and they say them out loud, and they look in the eyes of our executive volunteers or one another as they say this, and they reaffirm them with one another. And then the courses that they take are in character development and in empathy and in shame and forgiveness and career readiness and etiquette. They learn Emily Post etiquette training, and in parenting. It's comprehensive.
Can you get this into colleges, high schools?
It should be.
It seems to me that college, outside of a specialization, medical school or what have you, just doesn't prepare students for life. And this is basically what you're doing, is kind of re-educating. This is how to live your life, and because business principles and courses apply to getting a job and understanding how a business works. So as I'm listening to you, it's like, wait a minute, this should be broadened. This should be required curriculum elsewhere outside of prison.
Yeah, so I'm no longer at Defy now. I founded it and served as the CEO for nearly 8 years. When I was there and developing the curriculum, I was not the expert instructor for most of the courses. I would interview all types of other experts, and I learned so much in the process. So I agree with you that this curriculum should be taught in high schools and colleges or even earlier, junior high. And we can get into this, but within the new organization that I'm starting now, my vision is to make this curriculum as broadly accessible as possible, especially to people with criminal histories. But I plan for it to be accessible even on Amazon so that if other people want to learn it, that they will have access to it. I hated it. It would kill me that there are wait lists, hundreds of people deep, even just on 1 yard at a single prison. What I will tell you is that if it were accessible to everyone, most people don't have the same motivation and drive to improve themselves that the people that I serve have. I think there's something about having been at the bottom, having been written off, not having had an opportunity, that then when you see an opportunity, you treat it like gold. And that's something I respect greatly about the people that I serve. And other people who have information at their fingertips, opportunities at their fingertips, are not always as eager to take advantage of them. What I see consistently in the people that I serve is especially those who have served more time, like those of people who serve more than 5 years in prison. It's rare that I encounter someone who really doesn't want to transform at that point. If you just get a little slap on the wrist, though, you might just be thinking about, how to get out faster in your next criminal act. But especially when you're sitting there day after day after day, it can make you hungrier for change.
No, you're right. And wow, what a big point. I mean, Ben Franklin said, experience keeps a deer school, but fools will learn in no other. It's hard to take someone else's experience when you're not in that state of mind and kind of learn it. I'm just thinking about myself, how many times that I didn't pay attention to certain things, and only when there was an acute need for that thing did I take it in, which is, I learned it in my head. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, most people who are listening to this podcast right now will probably think like, why would I ever care about anything prison related? Yet most of your listeners have probably driven a car after leaving a party with a few too many drinks in them, not realizing that every single time that you do that, you are just as dangerous as anybody else driving down a highway. You could take out a family of four and you could end up behind bars for 10 years of your life. It's very easy to point the finger, though, and to say, oh, those people, or this stuff doesn't apply to me, until you actually need it.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, everybody's this far from, and if I think you make a point of it in the book, but if people knew, or if the authorities knew what we've done, that we never got caught, many more of us would be in jail or facing some kind of charge for sure.
Yeah. And since you were at Google, I happen to share a story about a Google executive. So Google is one of Defy's biggest supporters, having provided over $1 million of funding and then hundreds of volunteers. Google would bring busloads of employees to prison with Defy. And one day I got a call from a Google executive who said, I've been one of your donors and volunteers, but now I need your help. And he had been in a bar fight with his fists one night. And so a bar fight is a violent offense. It's a kind of thing that if you get convicted of, the kind of offense that politicians will say that you're not redeemable. Maybe people with nonviolent offenses, that they could be redeemed, but not someone with a violent offense. He was able to pay his attorney more than $100,000. He's a white male, and he was able to use his finances and his privilege to get off with community service. And a lot of the reason that I do this work is because if you don't have that kind of financial privilege, and a lot of times if your skin is not white, you are not likely to face the same kind of justice that you would if you were white and rich. And to me, that's simply not justice. I mean, one of the most sacred principles in our country is around justice and liberty and justice for all. And incarceration, the mass incarceration crisis affects way more people in communities of color and people who don't have resources. And so this is my best effort at leveling the playing field. And some people will say then, oh, it's because people of color are the ones who are committing all the crimes. And that's simply not true. Studies will show you that white and black people use drugs and sell drugs at pretty much equal rates. Yet if you are black or driving a beat up hoopty or beater, your likelihood of getting pulled over by the police and then getting charged and facing much harsher sentencing if you ever go in front of a jury is just much higher.
I wanted to ask, just to go back to the Defy curriculum just before we leave it, is there any one or two courses that are, is there an 80-20 as to the curriculum that you think, now reflecting, really is the most useful, that should be required of everybody that's in the prison system?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I could go in a million directions with this question, but the one that popped into my mind that I am working on, I'm recreating a new curriculum now with my new organization because, and this one's absolutely going to be factored in. And I think this could not only benefit anyone in prison, but anyone of your listeners as well. There's a course that we have on self-limiting beliefs and self-freeing beliefs. And this is common in sales. Salespeople are regularly, we regularly face the obstacles that hold us back, like the head trash that we tell ourselves that doesn't allow us to achieve. But it's not just salespeople, it's anyone out there in the world. Lies about ourselves, lies about other people, and lies or ideas that are not true, that limit ourselves. Like if the head trash for me is always like, I will always fail, or I will never succeed, or no one will ever love me, or I'm not strong enough to achieve what I want to achieve. Whatever negative tape is playing in my head probably came as a result of some experience in my life, some negative experience. Sometimes it happened to me one time. Sometimes it happened repeatedly. Sometimes these ideas can come out of what our parents teach us. Sometimes it comes out of what religion or culture taught us. We can adopt these values from all types of different ways. And as children, we usually just accept what we are given by adults or by religions or by cultures. But as adults, I believe it's our responsibility to say, wait a minute, what are the values that I have about myself, the beliefs that I have about myself and about other people, and how are these values serving me in my life? So a specific example is that many people in prison will tell me, I don't trust anybody. And that's something that they learned the hard way by being betrayed by a lot of people. And I say, well, you're trusting me enough to go through this program. And then they start to realize that maybe they are trusting some people sometimes. And I say, what if you replaced a self-limiting belief like I will never trust anybody ever again with a self-freeing belief that might say, like, I have developed discernment over time to know that there are certain people that I can trust, at least in some circumstances in my life, and I'm willing to become more trusting of other people. Because when I choose to never trust anyone, I write off opportunities, I write off relationships that might actually be in my best interest.
You mentioned in your book, in 2009, there was a falling out of the organization that you founded. You spent 5 years working within the Texas prison system, and then you're out, right? And you say in the book that you were stripped of your identity, the credentials that you had built up to learn to love yourself. That was all kind of gone, and you had to kind of relearn it. And you say that it took losing everything for you to realize who you really were, the gifts you had to offer to the world. Can we talk about that?
Of course we can. Yes. And to be really clear, that over what I went through in 2009, I did that to myself. I take full responsibility. I made bad decisions that I still regret to this day, and then I suffered through the consequences of that. And it was really, really painful, but I did discover some valuable things about myself. I did learn to bounce back in that process. So here's what happened. I started the prison entrepreneurship program in Texas in 2004, and I was 26 and then turned 27 when I started it. I ran it for 5 years. It achieved great success. It's still doing amazing in Texas now, 14 years later, still has a recidivism rate of less than 7%, one of the most successful prison rehabilitation programs in the country. I became known as a prison reform little poster child at a young age. I was blonde at the time. And then I blew my life up. So I had been married for 9 years, and I was living in a very Christian community where people say things all the time like God hates divorce and divorce is sin. I never imagined myself being a divorced woman. And 9 years into the marriage, I was served divorce papers, and divorce was the last thing I was expecting. And instead of reaching out to a community of people who could have loved me through my loss, I hid in shame. And the only people that I felt comfortable really confiding in were other people who understood loss and failure and shame. And those were people who had gotten out of prison. They'd been released, and they were graduates of my own program. And it helped me move out of my house, helped me out in my hard time. And then in a moment of weakness, I made these bad decisions and I crossed boundaries. I had relationships with people out of prison. And what I did was not illegal, but I knew better for sure. And I knew that if the Texas prison system found out about my choices, that it would not have reflected well. And so when they found out, they asked me if it was true. I said yes. And then they forced my resignation. And my resignation went public in the media. The media really liked this story of a young 31-year-old, who with a sex scandal. And so it went out across national media. And when I saw what people were writing about me and what my reputation had become, I hated my guts. I couldn't believe it. I was so deeply ashamed. I wanted to take my life. I lost. I had my identity as a wife and as a leader, and I had poured my everything into this program that I had built over 5 years. And so now I was without all of that. I didn't know who I was anymore, and I just was drowning in my shame and in my depression, and left with like a really horrible public image. And what saved me in that time was that I was very honest about my mistakes. Before my story went to the media, I sent a full disclosure letter to our 7,500 supporters telling them about my bad decisions, and about 1,000 people wrote me back with love and support and what are you doing next? And I didn't have a next plan. And a small group of advisors and mentors loved me back to life during that time. And they believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. I didn't think I had any value left for the world. So I had been in therapy since the age of 25, and then I immersed myself in even more therapy than ever before. And I was going 4 or 5 days a week. I started to seriously study the field of failure and realized that I wasn't alone. I wasn't the only leader who had ever screwed up. But it's interesting the way that the world treats leaders who do fail, because I love to have people who inspire me. But then when we see people fail, sometimes people like to dogpile on top of that and really drag them through the mud, even though I had been really honest about my choices. I didn't need other people telling me how horrible I was, but people certainly were quick to do that. Through the encouragement of a small group of people and the therapy, and I took a year off to work through a lot of my issues and my pain, I moved back to New York City from Texas, and I got an offer to go back into venture capital. And that seemed interesting to me, but because I was so insecure and so self-doubting, but at the same time, I have never doubted my calling of doing this work. I know why God put me on earth ever since starting it. And I know that even though I screwed up, that I have a set of gifts that is important. And so very nervously, and with the support of a few people, I started Defy Ventures almost 8 years ago as my own second chance to give second chances.
First, I was reading the book. I'm like, it's almost like a crux in the book, that event or that situation, because it involves second chances or what have you, which kind of ties everything together. I mean, the parallels are you felt like you violated your own personal code, then you punished yourself, your livelihood was taken, your mission was taken, then you put yourself in a prison of shame, right? Fear, whatever. You isolated, you said. So I'm reading and I'm like, man, I don't want to ask her about that, but it's like a part of, it's almost the most powerful part of kind of, for me at least, the book was, the honesty, the vulnerability that you had. So
I would be a hypocrite if I didn't talk about it. It's never fun for me or anyone to talk about their own screw-ups, but I spend my life talking about other people who have made bad decisions and have served time for it. So yeah, I'm like, you know what? I am one of them as well. I have made bad decisions as well.
Does talking about it, does it take the sting out of it in the sense that, from the shame standpoint?
I would say that I was able to grow and heal through my PEP resignation from 10 years ago. And I don't feel ashamed over it anymore. I still regret what I did because it caused a lot of pain and sadness, far more than just in my own life, but in the lives of other people as well who had trusted me. And so I regret it, but I don't feel ashamed over it. I have forgiven myself for the choices that I made back then. So it's not sting. I still have sadness, even talking about that from 10 years ago.
When I was reading a book, and I've been thinking about the people now. Now we have Twitter, and now it seems that the culture has forgotten redemption altogether. So social media has made us this unforgiving horde, and and Twitter is like a sentencing hearing. It's just it doesn't matter whether something's true or false. If something's out there in the jet stream, we crowdsource judgment and guilt, and there's no redemption. What do you say? I mean, that, how does someone deal with that?
Mm-hmm. I have a lot to say about this, especially in light of what most recently happened to me that we can also talk about. But I'll start by saying that in a day and age of 140 characters and people with such short attention spans and then salacious headlines, we have forgotten as a society about this other sacred principle in our country, which is the presumption of innocence. So if you read that someone did something, I'm totally guilty of this as well. Just assuming them, judging them as being guilty of it. And there are so many Twitter tough guys out there who would never say something to somebody's face, but using those 140 characters, they can spread hate, and hate unfortunately spreads a lot faster than love. So some of the things that I have learned through my 2009 ordeal and through my most recent one as well is, one, I try not to read what people say about me on social media, even when 99% of it is still positive and good. That 1%, I'd like to act tough enough like it doesn't affect me. It still hurts my feelings. So I try not to pay attention to it. And I discipline myself not to pay attention to it, actually. Another thing that I learned in 2009 was a good friend of mine said, all right, your response to divorce was pretty textbook. Like, people get divorced, they go have casual relationships. That's like a lot of people do that. But then I was told, don't let your response to my resignation also be textbook. And I think what my friend meant by that is a lot of times something bad happens, then we make a bad decision. We self-sabotage. Then we just keep dogpiling on with another bad decision and another bad decision. And because after we make one bad decision, it's easy to have self-hate or self-loathing or shame over that. And then it becomes this downward spiral of self-hate and self-loathing. And then I don't know what it is for you, but like then you start drinking every day over it. And then when you're drinking every day, then you make this bad decision and that one. And then it becomes really hard to recover. And so I was intentional about seeking out accountability and people who loved me through my mess and believed in me and were holding me accountable to making choices that were good for me. And that's the same thing that I'm doing right now. So disciplining myself, even when I don't believe in myself, to make good choices. And a quote that is that I look at every single day right now is, I will do nothing because of public opinion, but everything because of conscience. I'll say it one more time. I'll do nothing because of public opinion, but everything because of conscience. And so, especially having the reputation that I do today, if I allowed what other people think of me or my fear of what someone's going to say about me on Twitter to dictate my future, I would curl up in a ball and maybe I would just disappear altogether. I would not keep doing this work, because this work, even if people aren't saying bad things about me, I already work in the highest failure rate industry that there is, probably, with recidivism being off the charts so high and all the forces against it. This work is already hard enough. But then when I look and see what people say about me, it would be very easy to stop trying. But in the moments when I want to stop trying, and I will say that in the past 6 months of my life have been the very hardest of my life, and there are so many moments when I am very tempted to stop trying, I realize that every time that I want to quit, I'm being so selfish. It's all about me in those moments. What will people think about me? Will I succeed? Am I able to do this? And what gets me over that kind of thinking is not being selfish and thinking about the people that I serve, who are telling me that they believe in me, that they need me to keep trying. The wardens who absolutely still believe in me and are asking for me to come serve at their institution. When I think about other people and their situation and the gifts that I still have to offer the world, it makes me get over myself. But I need the help and the motivation. Like, so even this morning, I'm depressed right now. I'm in a depression. And one of the hallmarks of depression is just not being able to put one foot in front of the other and wanting to sleep too much or whatever. And so I didn't want to get out of bed this morning. And I certainly did not want to get out of bed and then work out this morning when I was not feeling very good. I am aware of that about myself, though. So I have like my vital signs. I know what keeps me alive and healthy and what I need to do that is in my best interest.
You certainly didn't want to talk to me.
No, well, I mean, actually talking to you, the reason that I'm talking to you right now is because I hope that one person who's listening to this gets something out of this. So part of getting over my own crap is by continuing to serve other people, right? So that it's hopefully good for other people. It's also good for me, though. And a lot of people want to wait until they're fully healed to start serving. But I actually think that one of the ways to get to healing is by serving, by getting over ourselves. Because if we stay selfishly entrenched, I don't think we're going to get there. But anyway, so I made a bet with one of my friends. And if I don't work out 5 days a week, which is a tall order for me, if I don't work out 5 days a week, I owe $500 to a certain political campaign that I otherwise would not be caught dead giving money to. And so I have worked out 5 days a week now for 8 weeks, but it's only because I am I'm accountable to that. And I'm basically forcing myself to do things that I don't want to. I'm forcing myself to put a foot in front of the other, even when it feels incredibly difficult. So that's a little bit of what I'm learning through this second process of hardship.
First of all, thanks for coming on through all this, because it's really powerful. But I just want to ask one question. It's very pragmatic. Forgive me, in the sense that, because I keep thinking about it. It's like, what if I was, and by the way, to me, it seems like, especially today, anybody could be caught doing anything and it could be made into a big deal if it's, on social media in some way. So,
caught or accused. You don't have to be caught.
That's what I mean. I mean, you could look, perception is reality on social media. So when you got advice around this, did anybody say defend yourself? Do you not defend yourself? I mean, because you're ignoring the news, right? You're saying, I don't want to hear. But do you just let it blow?
So almost 6 months ago, I was falsely accused of a whole lot of things by someone who attacked Defy, the organization, and me personally, with some very painful accusations and a whole barrage of them. When I resigned from Defy, in my resignation letter, I told the truth about me, but I didn't put up a defense case about myself. And even now, when I speak with you, or when I speak, I've had a few speaking engagements, I tell people, I'm not here to put up a defense case for myself. I'm here because then I would be making it all about me. And I really am not interested in that. I hope that I have just enough credibility that people want to hear my much more important message, which is about forgiveness. It's about second chances. It's about redemption, and it's about justice. There's a difference between saying I'm not guilty of the things I was accused of and then spending like an hour making a case for that.
In your book, you have this, which I thought was wonderful, the personal statements, and you were talking about vulnerability, and in it, they're personal statements, I guess, for those who were in prison who leave, that for them to rehearse when either they're trying to get funding for their venture or if they're getting a job. And you state that when it's properly rehearsed and presented to a parole board, it's a personal statement that can get an incarcerated person out of prison. Can you tell us a little bit about the personal statement and how that came about and the reason for it?
Yeah. So, and what I'll say is the most important element of this personal statement, which is basically your story of transformation after you've made a mistake or a bad decision. The most important element of it is authenticity, because a well-rehearsed pile of crap is, anyone can see through that. And you may be a great liar, but you probably won't be able to pull that off. So what I encourage people to do is an upfront disclosure model. And I follow that myself. I always talk about my 2009 resignation. Now I also talk about my 2018 resignation, unfortunately. So I share that with people instead of waiting to be caught or found out. So for the people that I work with, the people who are coming out of prison, they go to a job interview. They're taught through their Emily Post etiquette lessons and career readiness courses on how to dress and shake a hand and put together an impressive resume. And then they have a choice when they walk into the interview on, do I want to tell people that I have a criminal history? When do I tell people? How much do I tell them? Or do I just not say anything about it if it doesn't come up and wait for it to come up in a background check? Well, if you wait until you're caught through a background check later after the interview, your resume is going into the trash pile. And this lesson, I think, also applies to many of your listeners who have made poor decisions. If we wait until we are caught to reveal the truth, even though the truth is so painful for us to share a lot of times, it makes us feel so vulnerable, our chance of achieving success is probably lower. So what I teach the men and the women and the youth that I've served is through this model of upfront disclosure. When you walk into an interview, the most commonly asked first question is, so tell me about yourself. And right there, or as close to the beginning of the interview as they possibly can. I say, first start off by selling yourself. Share like 3 to 5 strengths about how you're so well qualified for this position or what you would bring to the table. Then immediately say something like, unfortunately, I haven't always been on the straight and narrow. I've made some bad decisions and I ended up serving 10 years in correctional facilities. And so I have them share that at the beginning, that they serve some time. I don't encourage TMI because a lot of times when we have been guilty of making bad decisions, we want to go way too far into it and share every last detail. And other people don't necessarily care, don't necessarily want to hear it. That's our guilty conscience talking and blabbing. And then, so after they share that they've served time, then I have them immediately talk about the lessons that they've learned from doing their time or from their decisions, and how they've used their time constructively, how they've grown, and why they can be trusted now. And as an employer, I realize that you have many choices in who you're going to hire, but I promise you that if you take a chance on me, that I will work harder than other people to prove to you my loyalty, to prove to you that I'm committed to this job. And that usually works. And what happens is that we, as bad decision makers, meaning humankind, we feel often so vulnerable in exposing ourselves and saying, look, I've screwed up before. But what I teach them is a lot of times when you're willing to share your own humanity, people, not everyone, but many people will end up trusting you more, and they will respect you for your courage for telling the truth. Now, there will always be people who will write you off and who will freak out and who will throw you out of their office anyway and who will judge you. But there will
you don't
also
want to work
be
for
some
those
people.
Yeah, you don't want to. That qualifies them. Yeah.
Maybe you did want to work for them. Like it just, there are some people who are more comfortable with mistakes or bad decisions than other people. And so we will all still get written off sometimes. But our chances of getting written off are lower. And what I also teach them is if you share that at the beginning of the interview, there are very few employers who, if you share that within the first 2 minutes of the interview, who are going to kick you out of their office after 2 minutes of an interview. They're probably at least, even if they get super uncomfortable, they're probably at least going to keep you in their office for another 10 minutes to make polite conversation. And then you have the opportunity to use that remaining 10 minutes to build from there. The alternative is to not share it at all, and then it's found out in a background check, or to wait until the very end of the interview when the employer is like, so anything else that I should know about you? And to be like, I committed murder. Yeah, that's not a good by the way to happen. And then the employer will be like, okay, peace. I'll be calling. And of course, they're not going to call. So it's better. It takes an incredible amount of courage to share it up front. But when you can actually control the narrative around it, you're probably not going to like what comes out of your mouth, because we never like the bad choices that we've made. It's just better than the alternative.
I think people should get the book. This little personal statement, I think it can be modified for people who, let's say, they've been away from the workforce for a couple of years or whatever.
Yeah, or it could be modified for after you've when you need to disclose any mistake that you've made. Like if you have cheated on a spouse, if you drop the ball at work, like even if you're not interviewing, but you made a mistake, how to tell your boss that you made the mistake. If you're late on a loan, like anything, it can be modified for any type of mistake or bad decision that you have made. I think that the universal principle here is about being honest and about covering your bases, not sharing. And something else that I write about in the book is that a temptation that we have after we screw up is to share maybe 95% of the mistake, but not to share the last 2 details, because the last 2 details seem too bad to us. But then if you're caught lying about the mistake, again, then you're going to lose your credibility. So covering your bases when you share your mistake.
No, you're right. That was that personal statement is a very useful tool, if you will, and I encourage people to kind of read it.
Yeah. And by the way, if you do, every dollar from that book is going into the new organization that I'm launching right now. And the proceeds from the book are to serve other people with criminal histories. So by reading or buying the book for yourself or for someone else who needs a second chance, hopefully you'll grow and transform from it. But you're also going to be providing an opportunity to somebody who's been hoping to have a second chance for a long time.
Can you say anything about the new venture?
Sure. So I'm technically still in stealth mode probably for a few more weeks, or I'm not sure how long. And I haven't revealed the name for it, but I am piloting the work right now at a couple of prisons in the state of California, and I'm thankful that officials in the California prison system and wardens all over know my character and also know the work that I've brought to their institutions. And I've gotten many calls from people who are like, "Oh, we see that you're more available now that I've left Defy." And so I can share the vision for it. The vision is to provide. I'm providing at the very least a correspondence program, and the vision is to be able to provide it to any incarcerated person who wants it in this country. And the work is the curriculum will be, I have plans for it to be right now to be like a whole lot more comprehensive than anything that I've ever built out before. What excites me the most about the work is that it's going to be created, and we've already started a little bit, out of Pelican Bay State Prison, which is a supermax prison in California where I've been working. And the curriculum is going to be written by the incarcerated men who are on the yards, even who are in solitary confinement. They have so much to offer. And I look forward to the authenticity of that curriculum coming from them. I'll provide them with the direction and structure, but it will be built by them for other incarcerated people. And I also look forward to having some of that work, some of the courses written by correctional officers and correctional officials to create empathy. And so I'm looking at creating a sustainable revenue model this time. I feel like I've done my penance in the nonprofit world. And so I'm looking at creating a sustainable revenue model so that I don't have to make this a nonprofit this time around, and so that it can also be widely scalable. And on top of that, I'm still doing the prison events. So if you want to come, we bring in volunteers. And if you come, it will transform your life. You're going to come and serve as a business coach and also look at their resumes and their stories of transformation. It's one day inside where every minute will really matter. And our inaugural 2 events are September 19th and 20th in the California prison system outside of Los Angeles. But I need security clearance a month in advance. Have more events in December as well.
In California?
And, yep, in California is where I'm starting. I'm starting really small right now.
Would you be there in December?
I will be there. I will absolutely be there.
This is outside of LA.
The events in September outside of LA. In December, it's at Pelican Bay. And
is that
so
San Francisco?
Bay,
where's that?
It is not. It's in Crescent City, California, which is at the Oregon border. It's right there on the ocean. It's quite beautiful, redwoods, and inconvenient to get to. But I will say it'll be worth your while if you come. We sometimes have a wait list for people who want to come. So if you're interested in coming,
I think I'm interested. What are the dates? Is that set?
So that is December 7th and 8th. And there's a Shark Tank style pitch competition and a graduation ceremony. And generous people have funded a bus that starts all the way in Los Angeles and brings the family members of our graduating men to the prison. Some of our guys haven't seen their kids in 10 years or longer. Some of them have not even met them because their families, most of them live 15 hours away each way. And so the families, there's a reunification. It's amazing. You'll be hearing business pitches for their ideas of businesses that they want to start after their release. You'll see them earn their Baylor MBA university certificate, and it's the greatest accomplishment of many of their lives. You'll be inspired to up your game in your life as well. So if you want to register for that or anything, email me at volunteer@cathoke.com. So the word volunteer at CATHOKE.com. hoke.com, and we can get you signed up. You don't have to be an investor or a CEO. We have a lot of business professionals who do come, and we do get a lot of CEOs and investors, but we welcome anyone to come.
Look at you light up when you talk about this, Catherine. Look at you. You light up.
Look, talking about my own life right now is pretty depressing to me, but talking about seeing these guys and especially their children experience joy and miracles and reunification, it's what I live my life for. So I would love to invite people into my world. I realize that coming to prison can seem or sound scary or intimidating, but I promise you that if you come, you will be met by the most receptive, thankful entrepreneurs that you have come across. And a lot of our volunteers say it's one of the top 10 experiences of their lives. It's really hard to describe. And when you walk out, you're going to have a hard time telling other people about it. You're going to sound a little bit like a crazy person like I do while you're describing how awesome it was. It's not some like depressing, hug a thug, come feel sorry for anyone type of experience. It's a really empowering, uplifting. You're not going to come there. I'm anti-pity. You're going to come there to partner with them in their journey of transformation. And it's a pretty cool thing.
Catherine, they can find you on cathoke.com. Is that right?
Yes.
And if they want to learn about Defy, they can go to defyventures.org.
Yes. And Defy Ventures is still operating, thankfully. So Defy and Prison Entrepreneurship Program are both still going. PEP is in Texas and Defy is national. So you can get involved in prison events and look up the defyventures.org website or find me, and you can buy my book on Amazon. And you can hear me reading it aloud on Audible as well, if that's of interest.
Oh, yeah. And it's a great book. I encourage everybody to read it. Sheryl Sandberg wrote the foreword, and she says in the foreword, we don't have a fixed amount of resilience. It's a muscle we can build in ourselves and our children and our communities. And I believe that. And I thank you for coming on, Catherine.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm grateful for this opportunity.
Well, that is all the time we have today. Please spread the word if you enjoyed the episode. Leave us a review on iTunes and share it with your friends on your favorite social platforms. Big thank you to Sam Williams, my audio guy. Make sure you visit LarryWeeks.com for all my content, and we will talk again soon.